Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. Consenting to watch Elias's house was folly, sheer, unadulterated folly. This truth pulses with the frantic rhythm of my own heart as I sit cocooned in my car, the engine a low thrum against the pre-dawn stillness at 3 in the morning. Outside his childhood home, the streetlights cast long skeletal shadows. My hands, slick with sweat, tremble on the steering wheel. I must anchor this experience in words, now, while the terror remains crystalline, while every chilling detail clings sharp and visceral to my memory. Perhaps then, someone might fathom the reason for my flight. It began innocuously enough. 3 days prior, Elias's voice crackled over the phone, laced with a carefully constructed casualness as he proposed the favor. His parents, having migrated to the Floridian sun, had left him steward of their old residence, a property stubbornly resisting the market. A winter freeze had savaged the plumbing. Repairs were underway. Would I mind staying a week, a presence while the workmen came and went? 2 months adrift in the sea of unemployment had left me susceptible. A quiet suburban interlude, free accommodation, payment besides. It sounded like Providence disguised as easy money. Viewed from the curb, the house presented a facade of unremarkable suburban decay. 2 stories clad in tired red brick, the white trim flaking like old regrets. Elias offered a perfunctory tour upon my arrival. The usual suspects: kitchen, living area, a trio of bedrooms slumbering upstairs. Then we stood before the basement door. This, he declared, his tone shifting subtly, remains inviolate. He produced an antiquated brass key, its teeth worn smooth. Just storage down there, detritus, the furnace, no call for exploration. He demonstrated the deadbolt, a robust, gleaming steel mechanism, jarringly new against the time-worn hardware elsewhere. Best left undisturbed, agreed? A shrug was my reply. Old houses invariably hoard secrets in their shadowed depths. Why court the dust and gloom? The inaugural day unfolded without incident. Plumbers arrived, wrestled with pipes, departed. I immersed myself in neglected novels, surrendered to the flickering television screen, summoned pizza, the mundane ballet of house-sitting. Yet, as twilight deepened into night, an anomaly surfaced. Ascending the stairs towards sleep, I registered it, a soft thud from beyond the basement door, the muffled resonance of something solid meeting wood. I froze, every nerve ending alight, straining against the silence. Nothing followed. The house settling, I reasoned. An old structure groaning under its own weight. Morning light brought feeble reassurance. Imagination, surely. Old houses whisper and sigh. But around midday, stationed in the kitchen, I witnessed the door itself stir. A mere tremor, a faint oscillation, as if a hand on the unseen side had tested the knob with hesitant curiosity. The formidable deadbolt held its ground. I dialed Elias. An odd query, I began, striving for nonchalance. Does that basement door exhibit spontaneous movement? Meaning what? His voice tightened, shedding its easygoing veneer. Uncertain, a vibration now and then. Air pressure fluctuations, perhaps? Yes, Likely that, he clipped out. Look, don't interfere with it, all right? The lock serves a purpose. Ensure it remains engaged. A desire to probe further prickled, yet an indefinable warning in his tone commanded restraint. Nonetheless, my attention became tethered to the door. Sporadically, it would twitch, sometimes a barely perceptible shiver, other times a distinct jiggle, mimicking someone trying the handle. The deadbolt remained steadfast. That second night, the auditory disturbances commenced. Engrossed in a late-night film streaming digitally, I became aware of footfalls overhead, measured deliberate steps traversing the second floor. I silenced the movie's soundtrack. The pacing persisted, heavy booted strides moving methodically from one room to the next. My phone felt suddenly heavy in my hand. 911 a hair's breadth away. Then the unseen walker reached the stairwell summit and began its descent. Each tread groaned beneath an invisible burden. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating quiet. Paralysis held me captive. The steps reached the ground floor, paused, then resumed their trajectory, moving inexorably toward the basement door. I watched, breath held captive in my lungs as they traversed the entryway. The door remained shut. The footfalls simply passed through, continuing their descent into the earth below. The remainder of the night I spent huddled on the sofa, every lamp in the house blazing defiantly against the encroaching darkness. No further sounds emanated from the depths. Dawn arrived, painting the windows gray. The urge to flee was potent, a primal scream in my veins. Yet my promise to Elias held me fast, and truly, what tangible threat had materialized? Strange acoustics in an aging structure? My fear felt disproportionate, foolish. The third day saw the phenomena intensify. The door's movements grew violent, sharp, percussive yanks that rattled the very frame. The footfalls returned, no longer content with a single passage. Now they paced, an incessant patrol up and down the basement stairs, sometimes hurried, sometimes agonizingly slow, always that same ponderous heavy tread. I sought refuge in music, television, any distraction, useless. The sounds permeated everything, an unnerving subterranean heartbeat. By evening, I was unraveling, nerves frayed by 2 sleepless nights. Every creak, every gust of wind sent jolts of adrenaline through me. And then, the critical error. A desperate conviction took root. I had to know. A swift glance, just enough to dispel the phantoms, to confirm the mundane reality of pipes and forgotten furniture generating these unnerving symphonies. I located the key where Elias had secreted it, perched atop the kitchen doorframe. My fingers trembled as I approached the brooding portal to the basement. The footfalls had ceased. An unnerving, absolute silence descended upon the house. The brass key slid into the lock. A moment's hesitation, a breath drawn deep, then the turn. The deadbolt retracted with a decisive click. I reached for the doorknob. Before my fingers could make contact, a tremendous force slammed into the door from the other side. The impact sent me staggering backward. The door shuddered violently in its frame as something struck it again and again, a relentless battery. Through the assaulted wood seeped a sound, not quite language, not quite a bestial snarl, but a guttural, choked effort to form words. I scrambled away, fumbling frantically for the key, the pounding unabated as I struggled to re-engage the lock. Just as the key turned, the knob began to rotate from within. I heard the internal mechanism grind, straining as whatever resided below fought against the newly secured deadbolt. The key nearly sheared off in my grasp, but the lock held firm. The assault persisted for another agonizing minute, then abruptly ceased. Into the ensuing silence crept something new. Weeping. Soft, muffled sobs emanating from the basement's confines. They sounded achingly, terrifyingly close to human. I retreated further from the door, phone already clutched, Elias's number materializing on the screen. "What in God's name is in your basement?" The words tore from my throat the moment he answered. A protracted silence stretched across the line. "You went for the door, didn't you?" His voice was heavy with resignation. "There's something down there, something alive." Elias sighed, a sound freighted with years of burden. "Listen very carefully. Exit the house immediately. Don't gather your things. Don't pause. Just leave. I'll arrive in 4 hours. Not before you explain this. Do you recall Leo, my younger brother?" Leo. The name surfaced from the deep recesses of memory. He vanished during our childhood, swallowed by absence one ordinary day, never found. "What about him?" "He didn't vanish," Elias said, his voice barely a whisper. "He transformed, began evolving into something else. Mom and Dad sought remedies, doctors, clerics, specialists. Nothing halted the progression. He grew increasingly volatile, shed his humanity piece by piece. The basement, it was the only structure robust enough to contain him. My own voice felt thick, distant. That entity below, that's Leo. A fragment, perhaps. What remains? We no longer know. Just depart, please. Now." No further urging was necessary. I bolted for my car, the front door left gaping in my wake. As I wrenched the vehicle out of the driveway, a final morbid curiosity compelled a backward glance. Through the grimy pane of a basement window, I registered movement. Something pallid pressed against the glass. A hand, yet distorted, possessing superfluous joints, the fingers elongated, wickedly sharp. That was 20 minutes ago. I remained parked a mile distant, the events replaying in a nauseating loop, attempting to reconcile the impossible. My phone vibrates intermittently, Elias calling again, but the words refuse to form. I cannot process his revelation, cannot erase the image from the window, and my thoughts keep circling back to Leo, the boy sequestered in that subterranean prison for 2 decades, gradually metamorphosing into the horror I encountered. Was any vestige of the human child still entombed within? Was that the source of the desolate weeping? Sunlight begins to bleed into the eastern sky. Elias will be here soon, demanding an account, seeking the specifics of what I endured, witnessed, heard. I will recount everything meticulously recorded here, but re-entry into that house is inconceivable. Certain doors, I now understand, are sealed for profound reasons. Somewhere nearby, a dog erupts in frantic barking, triggering another further off. A car alarm shrieks a discordant note in the growing light. My gaze drifts to the rearview mirror, half expecting a pursuit from the pre-dawn gloom, but only an empty street steadily brightening reflects back. I engage the transmission. It's time to put miles between myself and this place. Yet, as the car gains speed, A final, chilling realization lodges itself in my mind like a shard of ice. The basement door possessed a deadbolt on both sides, not merely to deny entry, but to guarantee confinement. The miasma of iron, thick and cloying, assaulted my senses before the door even yielded. In that instant, the sterile label of welfare check dissolved, replaced by a primal certainty. This remote farmhouse cradled a horror far exceeding the mundane tragedies of my profession. My name is Eleanor Vance. For 11 years, I've navigated the labyrinthine corridors of human suffering as a caseworker. Neglect's quiet erosion, poverty's gnawing ache, the bruises left by anger. Yet nothing in that catalog of sorrow prepared me for the abyss I was about to enter. It began mundanely enough. A worried neighbor, a lapse in sightings of the Morrow family. They were spectral figures on the county's edge. Father, mother, 2 children, inhabiting a small holding an hour's drive from the city's sprawl, preferring their own company. Rural reticence wasn't unusual. Days could pass unseen, but a discordant note hummed beneath the caller's concern. The car chewed up the miles on the desolate track, snaking towards the farm, dust motes dancing in the slanted late afternoon light. A visceral dread coiled in my gut as the landscape, usually bucolic, took on a brooding quality, shadows stretching like grasping fingers. I dismissed it, occupational hazard, an imagination fed on too many bleak case files. Gravel crunched under the tires as I pulled up. The silence was wrong. Curtains were drawn like eyelids shut tight against the world. No smoke curled from the chimney, no chickens scratched in the yard. The battered pickup, a permanent fixture in my memory of previous visits, was conspicuously absent. Taking a steadying breath, I stepped out. The air hung heavy, inert, the overgrown grass unstirred by any breeze. Approaching the porch, my eyes snagged on the front door, marred by deep, frantic gouges as if some desperate force had clawed, either to breach it or to flee. My knock sounded unnaturally loud, absorbed by the oppressive quiet. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Morrow? Eleanor Vance, Social Services, just checking in. Emptiness answered. I knocked again, harder, the sound echoing back flatly. Procedure demanded retreat, a note left, a return later. But an invisible tether held me fast. Call it instinct, call it folly. Something felt profoundly, irrevocably broken here. I reached for the handle. It turned with unnerving ease. As the door creaked inwards, the coppery reek intensified, hitting me like a physical blow. A hand flew to my mouth, bile rising. Hello? My voice trembled, a fragile thing in the cavernous silence. Is anyone home? Only the groan of ancient floorboards beneath my feet responded as I crossed the threshold. The interior was a study in gloom, heavy drapes strangling the dying light. As my vision swam into focus, chaos emerged from the shadows. A lamp lay shattered, its shade askew like a broken neck, a chair violently overturned, and then the blood. It wasn't merely present, it was pervasive. Arterial sprays decorated the walls like grotesque frescoes pooling thick and viscous on the hardwood floor. My pulse hammered against my ribs, every nerve fiber screaming flee, but a deeper imperative anchored me. If life, however faint, persisted within these walls, I had to find it. I ventured deeper, the soles of my shoes making a sickening, tacky sound with each step. The living room was a wreckage, furniture upended, family photographs dashed from their frames, their glass faces spiderwebbed. Whatever tempest had raged here, it possessed a terrifying ferocity. Nearing the kitchen archway, a sound pierced the stillness, freezing the marrow in my bones. A whimper, thin and reedy, almost lost in the heavy air. It emanated from upstairs. "Hello?" I called, forcing strength into my voice. "Is someone there? I'm here to help." Another whimper, a fraction louder, confirming its human origin. My hand, slick with sweat, found the banister. Each riser groaned under my weight, the sound amplified tenfold in the tomb-like quiet. Reaching the landing, I paused. The crimson trail continued, a gruesome path leading down the hallway towards a closed door at the far end. The whimpering was clearer now, punctuated by soft, hitching sobs. Slowly, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my throat, I approached the door. "I'm coming in," I whispered, the words barely audible. Turning the knob, I pushed the door inward. The room beyond was steeped in shadow, but I discerned a small figure huddled in the corner. As my eyes adjusted, the shape resolved into a child, a little girl, surely no older than 6 or 7. "Hey there," I murmured, striving for a calm I didn't feel. The terror, a cold serpent, coiled inside me. "My name's Eleanor. I'm here to help you. Are you hurt?" She looked up, her eyes vast pools of fear in a small, pale face. She was smeared with blood, her fair hair darkly matted with it. A closer look brought a wave of relief. The blood wasn't hers. She appeared physically unharmed. I took a cautious step closer. She flinched violently. "It's okay," I soothed, my voice low and even. "I won't hurt you. Can you tell me your name?" "Clara," she stammered, the name a fragile shard of identity in the wreckage. "Hi, Clara," I said, sinking to my knees to meet her gaze. "Can you tell me what happened? Where are your parents?" The mention of her parents shattered her fragile composure. Sobs racked her small frame. I edged closer, battling the instinct to snatch her up and run blindly from this house of horrors. "It's okay, sweetie. You're safe now. Can you tell me where your parents are?" Clara lifted a trembling arm, pointing towards the closet. My gaze followed. Only then did I notice the door, slightly ajar, and the dark, viscous fluid seeping from beneath it, staining the worn carpet like a spreading blight. My stomach churned. I knew with chilling certainty what lay beyond that door, but protocol and some grim necessity demanded confirmation. "Clara," I said, my voice miraculously steady, "I need you to close your eyes for me, okay? Squeeze them shut tight, and keep them closed until I say it's okay to open them. Can you do that?" She nodded, her eyelids clamping down. On legs that felt like brittle glass, I rose and crossed to the closet. The stench here was suffocating, primal. Reaching for the handle, I drew a ragged breath and pulled. The sight that greeted me will forever be seared onto the backs of my eyelids. Mr. and Mrs. Morrow, or what remained of them, savagely torn, mutilated beyond easy recognition, and nestled between them, impossibly still, lay a small boy, Clara's brother Finn. His eyes were wide, staring sightlessly at the ceiling, days dead. I stumbled back, a strangled gasp escaping me, managing to swing the closet door shut before vomiting onto the bedroom floor. wiping my mouth with a shaking hand, my mind fractured. What monstrous force could inflict such carnage? It bore the hallmarks of a frenzied animal attack, yet twisted into something nightmarishly extreme. And Clara. How had this small child endured? I turned back to her, still huddled, eyes clenched tight against the unseen. Get her out, now. Clara, my voice was a raw rasp. You can open your eyes, we're leaving, okay? I'm taking you somewhere safe. She nodded, lashes fluttering open. I extended my hand. After a heartbeat's hesitation, her small, cold fingers closed around mine. As we navigated the blood-slicked stairs, I fumbled for my phone. No signal, of course. Outside, the relatively clean air felt like a benediction. I guided Clara towards my car, settling her gently in the back seat. As I shut her door, a sound ripped through the twilight stillness, a low, guttural vibration that resonated not in the ears, but in the bones. I turned, slowly, scanning the overgrown field bordering the house. There, at the edge where tall grass met untamed woods, movement rippled. Something vast, low to the ground. Matted pelt, claws like hooked daggers catching the dying light, and twin embers burning yellow in the deepening shadows. Eyes locked onto mine. Thought ceased. Instinct took over. I wrenched open the driver's door, flung myself inside, twisted the key. The engine roared, a defiant sound in the encroaching dark, just as the creature erupted from the grass, charging with terrifying speed. I slammed the gear stick into reverse, tires spitting gravel. The rear-view mirror framed a nightmare. It was gaining, impossibly fast, jaws agape, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. We hit the track, tires squealing as I shifted into drive. Accelerator mashed to the floor. It was right behind us, so close I heard the shriek of claws scraping against the trunk metal. A sound like fingernails dragged down the blackboard of sanity. "Hold on, Clara!" I yelled, wrenching the wheel, trying to shake it. For agonizing miles it pursued, a relentless shadow of teeth and claws. Each time hope flickered that we'd lost it. A glimpse in the mirror, tireless, implacable, extinguished it. Only when we burst onto the main highway, the blessed sight of other headlights blooming around us, did it finally, grudgingly, fall back into the darkness it had sprung from. As we raced towards the city, distant lights promising a fragile sanctuary, I finally allowed myself a shuddering breath. Clara was curled into a tight ball on the back seat, utterly silent. I glanced at her in the mirror, this tiny flotsam salvaged from an unimaginable wreck. "It's okay," I said, the words tasting like lies, meant as much for myself as for her. "We're safe now." But driving through the night, my hands trembling on the wheel, I knew safety was a shattered illusion. We had escaped the immediate horror, yes, but the thing was still out there, as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind the stark, indelible images of the farmhouse I understood. My life and Clara's had been irrevocably altered. The quiet countryside hours ago, a place of peaceful solitude, now pulsed with hidden menace. Henceforth, every shadow would hold the potential for terror, every silence pregnant with the echo of that bone-chilling growl. Entering the city, its familiar skyline offering cold comfort, I made a silent vow. Protect Clara, uncover the truth behind her family's annihilation, find some way, any way, to impose sense onto the nightmare. Yet a chilling certainty settled deep within me. Some horrors defy explanation. Some terrors don't vanish with the dawn, and sometimes the monsters lurking in the periphery are terrifyingly, undeniably real. Weariness had become a physical weight, pressing Elias down after interminable hours swallowed by the relentless asphalt ribbon. His eyelids felt like sandpaper against his corneas. When the motel materialized from the roadside gloom, a skeletal structure barely clinging to existence, rational thought was a luxury he couldn't afford. Decrepit, undeniably, but it promised horizontal stillness, an escape from the tyranny of the road. He swung the car into the cracked lot, the engine's sigh echoing his own exhaustion, and stepped out into the stagnant night air. The lobby, bathed in the sickly fluorescence of a single buzzing tube, was a void save for the figure hunched behind a worn counter. Silas, the night sentinel, offered no greeting, merely slid a tarnished key across the counter. A mumbled directive about departure times dissolved into the ambient hum before he retreated into the shadows behind his domain. Elias, preoccupied solely with the promise of oblivion, gave the curt exchange little heed. His assigned room lay near the terminus of a bleak corridor, its door facing the deserted expanse of the parking lot, where a solitary sodium lamp cast distorted, jaundiced patterns. He turned the key, the lock groaning in protest, slipped inside, and secured the deadbolt with a decisive click. The space was austere, a bed sagging slightly under the weight of unseen histories, a scarred dresser, a television bolted high on the wall like a captive sentinel, faded floral wallpaper peeled at the seams, revealing glimpses of the discolored plaster beneath. An antiseptic tang, sharp and chemical, overlaid a deeper, mustier scent. Sufficient, Elias deemed it. His duffel bag landed with a soft thud. Shoes were kicked aside. A profound exhalation escaped him. Release, at last. The grime of the journey clung to his skin, demanding ablution. He flicked the bathroom switch. The light stuttered, flickered with theatrical reluctance, then settled into a low electric thrum. Twisting the shower faucet, he waited for the pipes to relinquish their chill, and it was then, in the periphery of his vision, that he noticed it. A small, perfectly round perforation in the drywall beside the sink. No larger than a pencil's diameter, yet drilled with unnerving precision. It seemed to bore directly into the adjoining room. He leaned closer, narrowing his eyes. An artifact of some forgotten repair, perhaps. A misdrilled hole carelessly abandoned, yet its clean edges, the deliberate nature of its placement, resonated with a quiet wrongness. Unease stirred within him, shaking his head, dismissing the nascent paranoia. He tore a wad of tissue from the dispenser and meticulously plugged the tiny orifice. A makeshift, inadequate seal, but it served to obscure the unsettling void. His shower was a hurried affair, the prickling sensation on his skin now less about road dust and more about a burgeoning anxiety he couldn't rationalize. Back in the main room, dressed but not settled, the feeling lingered, a phantom touch. He switched on the television, seeking refuge in its manufactured noise, flicking past channels until an ancient sitcom offered a semblance of normalcy. Yet his thoughts orbited stubbornly back to the bathroom, to that unsettling puncture in the wall. His gaze kept darting towards the closed bathroom door, anticipating What? He didn't know. Then a sound, a soft tap, almost tentative, seeming to emanate from within the bathroom wall. Elias froze, his breath catching. Faint, yes, easily mistaken for the groans of old plumbing, yet distinct enough to register, to ignite a spark of genuine alarm. He sat rigid, the television's laugh track suddenly obscene, straining to hear past the pounding in his own ears. Silence returned, thick and watchful. Imagination, he chided himself. Jangled nerves from the drive, the inherent creepiness of dilapidated motels. He forced a deep breath, commanding his muscles to unclench. Another knock, sharper this time, less ambiguous. A shiver traced the length of his spine. Logic warred with instinct, but curiosity, morbid and insistent, propelled him from the bed. He moved slowly, deliberately, towards the bathroom. Pushing the door open, he scanned the small space. Everything appeared untouched, except the hole. The tissue plug was gone, vanished. A cold certainty washed over him. It had been removed from the other side. His thoughts fragmented, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. With trembling fingers, he grabbed a fresh clump of tissue, jammed it forcefully into the opening, packing it tighter this time. He retreated, struggling for equilibrium, whispering reassurances that felt hollow even to himself. But the conviction remained, an unseen presence, adjacent, aware. He backed out, closing the door, and returned to the edge of the bed, his posture taut, senses hyper-alert. He watched the bathroom door, listening intently. Minutes stretched into an eternity before the next sound arrived. A faint, dry scratching. Hesitation warred with a compulsive need to know. He rose again, drawn inexorably back. He peered into the bathroom. The tissue was gone. Again, his stomach plummeted, the tremor in his hands intensified. Compelled, he pressed his ear flat against the cool plaster beside the hole, straining for any betraying sound from the neighboring room. Nothing but profound silence answered. Slowly, deliberately, he retreated, closed the bathroom door, and this time turned the flimsy lock. He sank back onto the bed, trying to anchor himself in reason. Just an old building, strange acoustics, maybe another guest. But every settling creak of the structure, every distant rumble of traffic seemed amplified, imbued with sinister portent. The feeling of being observed intensified, palpable as a physical touch. The television droned on, unnoticed. His eyes remained fixed on the locked bathroom door, his mind painting scenarios of intrusion, of violation. Was it Silas, the spectral manager, indulging some perverse voyeurism, or something less definable, more inherently malevolent? He fought the tide of panic, the urge to flee into the night. Just as a fragile calm began to settle, it returned. The scratching, soft yet deliberate, insistent, like fingernails whispering across the wall's surface. He sat bolt upright, pulse frantic. He resisted the urge to investigate again, knowing what he would find, yet the not knowing was somehow worse. Taking a ragged breath, he stood, crossed the room one final time, his hand unsteady as it grasped the knob. He turned it, pushed the door inward. The hole gaped, dark and vacant. The tissue was gone. It stared back at him, an empty eye in the wall. Air hitched in his throat. The pounding in his chest became almost painful. He backed away, shut the door, and collapsed onto the bed, wrapping his arms around himself as if to ward off an invisible chill. The certainty of being watched was absolute now, a suffocating presence just beyond the thin partition, patient, predatory. He kept vigil, eyes locked on the bathroom door, every nerve fiber vibrating with tension, poised for flight. He didn't know how the intrusion might come, through the wall, the window, the main door. Only that it felt imminent, a circling threat awaiting its moment. Sleep was an impossibility. He sat there, rigid, until the first tentative fingers of dawn probed the edges of the cheap curtains, diluting the oppressive darkness. Without a second thought, Elias snatched his bag. He didn't pause to return the key, didn't risk another encounter in the lobby. He burst out into the cool morning air, fumbled with his car keys, the metal cold against his trembling palm. The engine roared to life, and he sped out of the lot, tires spitting gravel, never once glancing in the rearview mirror. Miles melted away before the frantic rhythm of his heart began to subside, before his breathing evened out. The motel receded, but the feeling lingered, an indelible stain on his memory. The unnerving sense of scrutiny, the cold knowledge of the watcher. He knew with chilling certainty that whoever, whatever, occupied the room beside his remained, perhaps waiting still for the next weary traveler to discover that small, deliberate hole and wonder, as Elias now perpetually did, what horrors might have transpired had he dared to stay. The pursuit of self-improvement, a clumsy pilgrimage, had led me here to this temple of iron and sweat, tucked anonymously into a strip mall's flank. Health, a vague concept involving less of me and more exertion, was the goal. Consistency remained elusive, but the intention pulsed weakly. This wasn't a gleaming fitness palace, it was Spartan, functional. A handful of treadmills sighing under infrequent use, weight machines like dormant insects, a simple rack of free weights. Its virtue lay in its emptiness, a quietude that soothed the self-consciousness endemic to men built like myself. Evenings were my sanctuary. Within this sanctuary, the after-work rush had dissipated, the morning zealots long gone. Usually, the vast space echoed with the solitary efforts of myself and perhaps 2 or 3 other souls, each cocooned in their private ritual of strain and release. But one particular twilight, the familiar equilibrium fractured. The routine began unaltered. Car parked, water bottle clutched like a talisman, the familiar slide into the artificially cooled air, a nod to the impassive attendant behind the counter, the clatter of belongings into a locker. The main floor held only sparse signs of life. One figure pacing steadily on a treadmill, another wrestling with dumbbells in a distant corner. Relief washed over me. Solitude beckoned. I claimed an elliptical, surrendered to the rhythm thumping through my headphones, and let the world outside the arc of my movement dissolve. Perhaps 10 minutes dissolved with it before a peripheral shift registered. Someone occupied the adjacent treadmill. A glance, involuntary and brief. Male, mid-30s maybe. Dark hair framing a face etched with focus. He possessed a density, not the sculpted exaggeration of a bodybuilder, but a solid, grounded presence. His eyes, though, were locked forward with unnerving intensity. I mentally shrugged, retreating back into my sonic bubble. Yet the unease lingered. Each time my gaze drifted towards the wide mirror spanning the wall, I intercepted his reflection glancing my way. Fleeting, almost subliminal side eyes. paranoia, I chided myself. He's just scanning the room. But the pattern persisted. My upward glance would meet his mirrored one, a fractional collision before his gaze snapped back to the digital display before him. The intrusion frayed my concentration, disrupted the cadence of my breath and limbs. What was his focus? What was the silent query in those brief, repeated looks? The urge to truncate my session, to simply flee, warred with a stubborn refusal to let him see he'd unsettled me. When the elliptical's timer finally granted release, I migrated towards the free weights, hoping physical distance would sever the invisible tether. It was a futile hope. The moment I stepped off, he concluded his run, his movements mirroring mine as he strode purposefully towards the weight section, claiming the bench directly opposite my chosen station. Ignoring him became an act of sheer will. I concentrated on form, on the burn in my muscles, but his scrutiny felt like a physical weight. I could feel his eyes tracing every repetition, cataloging every strain. I resisted looking up, denying him the reaction he seemed to court, until the pressure became unbearable. My gaze flickered upwards. He was staring, openly now, a faint, unsettling curl at the lip that wasn't quite a smile. A spike of anger, hot and sharp, tightened my grip on the cold metal. The words, "What's your problem?" clawed at my throat, but I swallowed them down, forcing a semblance of calm. No scenes, no trouble. I completed my set with deliberate precision, racked the weights, and walked towards the water fountain, a strategic retreat disguised as thirst. Turning back, water cool against my lips, I froze. He stood mere feet away, perfectly still, his eyes tracking my movement. He wasn't pretending to exercise anymore. The charade had dropped. He was simply watching. That look remained, unreadable, neither hostile nor welcoming, existing in a disquieting space between. A chill traced my spine, my pulse accelerating its frantic rhythm. Taking a deep, steadying breath, feigning normalcy, I walked towards the locker room. Escape seemed the only logical course now. Grab my things, vanish into the night before the strangeness escalated further. Yet as I fumbled with my bag, the soft tread of footsteps sounded behind me. My eyes darted to the locker room mirror. He filled the doorway, a silent sentinel, again just watching. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hands trembled slightly as I jammed my water bottle into the bag. Turning felt like conceding defeat, yet ignoring him was no longer an option. I pivoted, meeting his gaze directly, forcing steel into my voice. "Can I help you with something?" He regarded me, his expression unchanged, that ghost of a smirk playing at his mouth. "I just enjoy the view," he murmured, the words low, intimate, invasive. Nausea churned in my gut, chased by a surge of adrenaline. Every nerve screamed, "Flight!" I offered no reply, no flicker of reaction. Grabbing my bag, I pushed past him, my shoulder brushing his, a brief, unwelcome contact. I didn't slow my pace, didn't glance back. Bypassed the front desk without a word. Out into the cool night air, into the anonymous safety of my car, hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles shone white. The rearview mirror reflected only empty asphalt and receding streetlights as I drove. Yet the phantom sensation of being watched clung to me, heavy and cold in the darkness. Sleep offered no refuge that night, only fragmented replays. The unnerving stillness, the unwavering stare, the smirk. Logically, he was just a creep, someone whose social boundaries were warped. But logic offered little comfort against the visceral memory of his predatory focus, the way he'd shadowed me through the quiet gym. The following day, the thought of returning felt like willingly walking back into a cage. Avoidance beckoned, but a stubborn spark of defiance resisted. I wouldn't let him dictate my routine, wouldn't grant him that power. So I went back, armed with a fragile hope he wouldn't be there. The hope shattered the instant I walked through the door. He was there, seated on a bench near the entrance, eyes fixed on the doorway as if awaiting my arrival. Our gazes locked. The smirk bloomed anew, identical to the night before, chillingly familiar. I forced myself through the motions of a workout, constructing a wall of determined ignorance around me. He made it difficult. He didn't approach, didn't speak, but he maintained a constant, unnerving proximity. From machine to machine, he followed, a silent orbit he maintained around me, always within sight, his presence a palpable pressure. The gym, once a refuge, now felt like a meticulously closing trap. Paranoia became my workout partner. Every turn seemed to reveal him, lurking just beyond my direct line of sight. I attempted to voice my unease to the attendant, gesturing discreetly. "That guy," I began, but the attendant merely shrugged, a gesture of profound indifference. "He's here a lot," was the extent of his insight. "Never causes trouble." But this felt different. This felt personal, a disturbing game orchestrated solely for me, testing my limits. And try as I might to banish him from my awareness, the chilling certainty remained. He was always there, always watching. One evening, the elastic tension finally snapped. I completed my final set, headed directly for the locker room, intent on a swift departure. Packing my bag with hurried movements, I sensed him before I saw him. I turned. He stood framed in the doorway again, blocking the only exit. Panic flared hot and suffocating. My eyes scanned the empty, tiled space. We were alone. "What do you want?" The demand escaped me, a tremor betraying the force behind the words. He simply looked at me, that infuriating smirk etched onto his face, immovable. "I told you," he replied, his voice retaining its eerie calm, its unnerving placidity. "I just enjoy the view." I didn't wait for more. A surge of pure primal flight propelled me forward. I shoved past him, shouldering him aside with more force than intended, bursting out of the locker room and into the main gym area. I didn't stop running until I hit the cool, indifferent air of the parking lot, chest heaving, heart aching with the frantic rhythm. I never returned to that strip mall sanctuary. The thought of crossing that threshold again, of potentially meeting that gaze, of feeling that silent, predatory scrutiny was unbearable. Months have bled into seasons, yet the unease lingers, a persistent echo, sometimes walking alone or catching a reflection in a darkened window. The phantom sensation returns. The chilling certainty that somewhere unseen, he is still watching, waiting. The motel's sign, a pale ghost of neon advertising vacancy, stuttered against the rain-lashed dark, painting the asphalt sea of the parking lot in washes of sickly light. I remember easing the car into that desolate harbor, utterly oblivious that I was docking not for respite, but for a passage into a darkness that would forever stain my memory. Hours had bled away on the highway, a ribbon slicked black by the deluge, my vision blurred by fatigue and the relentless assault of water against the glass. That flickering promise of shelter, glimpsed through the storm's gray shroud, felt less like a choice and more like destiny. The Serenity Lodge offered none. Its facade wept paint like old tears, windows filmed with grime stared blankly, and the entire structure slumped under an oppressive weight of abandonment that raised the hairs on my neck. Yet the hour was late, exhaustion a leaden cloak on my shoulders, and the void between towns stretched into daunting miles. Necessity, the grim bargainer, settled the terms. Inside, the air hung thick and stale. Behind the counter, hunched before the hypnotic flicker of a cathode ray relic, sat a man whose face seemed carved from driftwood, ancient and impassive. His eyes, like chips of obsidian, slid over me without purchase. "Room," I managed, the word scraped raw from a throat tight with weariness. A grunt was his sole reply as a hand, gnarled as oak root, retrieved a key, his gaze never leaving the television's glow. 40, cash. The bills felt unclean passing from my hand to his. He slid the tarnished metal key, a genuine artifact in this plastic age. Across the scarred counter, his dismissal absolute. My allocated cell lay at the building's desolate extremity, a lonely outpost. The key protested in the lock, a grating complaint against intrusion, before the door finally yielded with a groan that vibrated in my bones. The room exhaled a breath of dust and decay. Furnishings, relics of a forgotten decade, huddled in the gloom. Still, it was a haven from the storm. The bed linens appeared blessedly clean. My duffel dropped to the threadbare carpet. I surrendered to the mattress, a profound sigh escaping me. And then, the silence descended. The storm had wept itself out, leaving behind a quiet so profound it felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. No hum of traffic, no murmur of fellow travelers, just the hollow pulse of my own blood. It was as if the world outside the peeling walls of the Serenity Lodge had simply ceased to exist. Sleep must have claimed me then, a brief, shallow dive, because awareness returned with a violent jolt, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. An unknown disturbance had ripped me from unconsciousness. Lying rigid in the dark, straining to hear past the ringing in my ears, I caught it. Voices, subdued yet sharp with urgency, filtering through the thin walls, seeming to emanate from just beyond my window. Drawn by a dread curiosity, I slid from the bed, moving with ghost-like stealth across the floor. Through a sliver between the dusty, moth-eaten curtains, I peered out. Two figures stood swallowed by the deeper shadows pooling near the edge of the lot's weak illumination. Their conversation was a low, conspiratorial murmur, punctuated by nervous glances cast into the surrounding emptiness. An instinctive alarm flared within me. Though the words were mostly indistinct, fragments snagged in my hearing, chilling me to the core. Consignment arrives before dawn. Utmost discretion. The law's been sniffing too close. Silas won't forgive another mistake. The implication settled like ice in my veins. This was no mere clandestine transaction. It resonated with something far darker, far more dangerous. I recoiled from the window, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Police? What could I possibly report? Whispers overheard, shadowy figures, a gut feeling steeped in paranoia. In a place radiating such decay, involving the local constabulary felt like a gamble I couldn't afford, perhaps even an invitation to deeper trouble. As I wrestled with indecision, a sharp, sudden rap echoed against my door. My heart vaulted into my throat. Had they spotted me? "Room service," a female voice called, thin and reedy. Room service? Now? Here? It defied all logic. Against every screaming instinct, I eased the door open a fraction. A woman stood there, perhaps middle-aged, her eyes wide and skittering down the deserted corridor like trapped birds. Violet shadows bloomed beneath her collar. "Please," she breathed, the word trembling on her lips. "You must help. They mean to kill me." Before comprehension could dawn, she slipped past me, a shadow detaching itself from the hallway's gloom, and secured the door with a soft click. Under the room's stark, buzzing fluorescent light, the terror etched onto her features was undeniable. Raw. "Who?" I whispered, the answer already forming, cold and heavy in my gut. "The men," she gasped, words tumbling over each other in a torrent of fear. "The ones who own this place. It's not just lodging. They bring them here. Girls, so young, kept below until the buyers arrive." A wave of nausea washed over me as the monstrous truth landed. Human trafficking, not in some distant abstract news report, but here, now, in this forgotten corner of the world. "We have to call the authorities," I stammered, fumbling for my phone. Her hand shot out, gripping my arm with surprising strength, her eyes vast with panic. "No, you can't. The town police, they're complicit, paid to ignore it." My mind struggled to grasp the depth of the corruption. No local help. The urge to flee, to erase this encounter, surged powerfully, but one look at the sheer, naked desperation in her face anchored me. I couldn't abandon her. "All right," I said, forcing a calmness I didn't feel into my voice. "All right. We need a strategy. Is there anyone at all we can trust?" She shook her head, tears finally spilling, tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. "I don't know. I've looked for a way out months. They watch constantly. Tonight, they're preoccupied. The new consignment." A glacial dread solidified within me. "New consignment? You mean—" She nodded, her gaze falling away. "More girls, expected soon." In that instant, passivity shattered. Waiting was not an option. Rescue wouldn't simply arrive. We had to force it. We had to act. "Tell me everything," I commanded, my voice low and urgent. "Every detail. How it works, where they hold them, schedules, names, everything." For the following hour, Eliza. She finally whispered her name, unspooled the grotesque tapestry of the Serenity Lodge's hidden purpose. As she spoke, the chaotic fragments of fear began to coalesce into a plan, terrifying in its audacity, potentially fatal, yet the only sliver of hope visible. Using the room's ancient, crackling landline, we initiated a cascade of calls. State troopers, the FBI, every national news desk I could conjure. We painted a stark picture, a major trafficking hub, location precise, details chillingly specific. We banked on the glare of outside attention, overwhelming any local conspiracy of silence. Then, the precipice. While Eliza manufactured a diversion, A staged argument, a faked car problem, anything to draw eyes toward the front lot. I moved toward the building's core, toward the basement. The lock on the cellar door was insultingly flimsy. A heavy fire extinguisher, liberated from its bracket in the hall, shattered the jamb. The darkness within was thick, smelling of damp earth, stale fear, and something indefinably tragic. My eyes adjusted to reveal them. Perhaps a dozen figures, young women, girls, huddled together like frightened deer, their eyes luminous with terror and confusion in the gloom. Some bore the haunted look of long captivity, others the raw shock of recent arrival. A profound ache bloomed in my chest for their stolen youth, their brutalized innocence. "It's all right," I murmured, hands held open, palms out. "We're getting you out. You're safe." Extracting them was a symphony of suppressed panic. Each floorboard creak, each distant shout sent jolts of adrenaline through me. Yet, propelled by a force beyond reason, we succeeded. We bundled them into my sedan, and an old service van, Eliza, somehow coaxed to life, its engine catching with a reluctant cough. We hadn't covered a mile down the desolate highway when the night erupted behind us in flashing strobes of red and blue. A terrifying moment stretched. Was it the corrupted local force come to reclaim their prey? But as the vehicles swarmed closer, the markings became clear. State police cruisers, unmarked federal cars. Relief washed over me, so potent it was dizzying. The ensuing hours blurred into a montage of flashing lights, urgent questions, blankets draped over shivering shoulders, and the quiet, devastating tears of reunion as families were contacted somewhere beyond this nightmare. I watched the traffickers, faces sullen or snarling, being led away in cuffs. I saw the girls, fragile but free, guided toward safety. The sheer scale of the horror we had stumbled upon and the improbable victory we had snatched began to settle. Eliza found me amidst the controlled chaos, her eyes swollen but shining. "Thank you," she uttered, the simple words weighted with lifetimes, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "You saved all of us." As the first tentative rays of dawn painted the eastern sky, I leaned against the hood of my car, observing workmen dismantling the Serenity Lodge sign. The immediate nightmare had fractured, but its echoes would resonate indefinitely within the rescued girls, within Eliza, within me. I had embarked on a simple journey and driven straight into the maw of depravity. Yet, in confronting that abyss, I'd unearthed a resilience I never knew I harbored. I had stared into the face of profound evil and against staggering odds had not blinked. Pulling away from the lodge for the final time, the asphalt unreeling before me felt different. The world seemed simultaneously darker, shadowed by the knowledge of humanity's capacity for cruelty, and paradoxically brighter, illuminated by the stubborn persistence of courage and hope, even in the deepest rot. I drove onward, carrying the burden of witness, forever changed, bound by a silent promise never again to simply pass by when darkness called for intervention. The first missive arrived nestled within the folds of my morning broadsheet, a brittle scrap of paper dislodged like an unwelcome insect as I unfurled the day's trivialities. "I know the geography of your slumber," it declared in cramped, arachnid script. A hollow laugh escaped me, some puerile jest, surely. Yet this flimsy harbinger marked the overture to a ghastly waltz with madness, a pursuit that would fray the very fabric of my mind. That Tuesday morning remains etched in memory, unremarkable save for the venomous little note. Barely a week had passed since I'd taken possession of this apartment, a space still echoing with emptiness, adrift amidst a flotilla of cardboard boxes and the sharp perfume of fresh paint. The message felt crass, likely the work of some acquaintance eager to christen my new dwelling with unease. I crushed it into a tight ball, dispatching it to the bin's oblivion before hurtling towards the demands of the day. Returning that evening, the city's grime clinging to me, I found its twin. Affixed to my front door with a stark piece of tape, this one observed, "The crimson shirt becomes you." A glacial tide surged through my veins. Crimson, indeed, was the shirt I wore, donned hours after the first note's discovery. My hand, suddenly a traitor, trembled against the lock. The corridor felt vast, predatory. Inside, bolts were thrown, locks tested, a chair wedged beneath the knob, fortifications against an unseen siege. Overkill, I chided myself, mere coincidence. Perhaps the note lingered there all day, the shirt a stroke of malignant luck. But dawn delivered another. This trespasser lay brazenly upon the kitchen counter, beside the silent coffee machine. "Your windows invite intrusion," it counseled. The subsequent hour became a frantic pilgrimage from pane to pane. Each remained secured, precisely as I'd left them. No splintered frame, no scuff upon the sill, no earthly sign of entry. Yet the note persisted, inked in that same spidery hand. It was then that true fear, cold and suffocating, took root. A watcher haunted my periphery, an entity capable of breaching my sealed sanctuary without whisper or trace. My appeal to the constabulary proved an exercise in futility. Lacking tangible proof of violation or explicit menace, their hands were tied. "Change the locks," they advised blandly. "Heighten your awareness." Platitudes against a phantom. The notes, however, were relentless. Sometimes blatant, plastered to the bathroom mirror, slid beneath the door like spectral mail. Other times insidious, secreted within the pages of a novel mid-read, folded into the pocket of a jacket dormant for weeks. Their content spiraled inward, becoming disturbingly intimate. "You murmur secrets in your sleep," one divulged. Another confessed, "I enjoy observing your breakfast ritual. Such tranquility." Paranoia became my shadow. Every creak, every distant siren sent jolts through my system. I fortified my domain with a network of digital eyes, cameras scrutinizing every approach. Yet the notes materialized still, mocking the unblinking lenses that captured nothing. My existence frayed. Sleep offered no refuge. Concentration fractured. Weight sloughed off, replaced by bruised hollows beneath my eyes. Friends voiced concern, their words muffled by the wall of secrecy I erected. How could I articulate this invisible siege without sounding utterly unhinged? One evening, perhaps a month into this harrowing descent, I returned to chaos. Drawers yawned open, their contents vomited onto the floor. Books lay splayed, spines broken, pictures hung askew, mocking gravity. And there, enthroned upon the coffee table amidst the wreckage, a fresh decree. No corner is hidden from my gaze. Hours were lost restoring order, cataloging possessions with frantic intensity. Nothing, it seemed, was pilfered. The violation was the point, a brutal demonstration of power, a reminder that my world could be overturned at the intruder's whim. The following day, I severed ties with my employment, initiating plans for flight. This existence was untenable. I craved anonymity, distance, a sanctuary beyond the reach of my tormentor. Yet, as I taped shut a box brimming with crockery, my fingers brushed against another folded secret. "Evasion is futile," it whispered. "Wherever you flee, I follow." The dam broke. I crumpled amidst the cardboard ruins, overtaken by convulsive sobs, a prisoner in a labyrinth with no exit. Desperation led me to a private investigator, a Mr. Thorne. I laid bare the chronicle of notes, the escalating dread. He listened, his expression hardening, meticulously documenting the saga. "This is no random affliction, Elias," he stated finally, his voice low. "This individual possesses an unnerving intimacy with your life, access to your most private space. Have you entertained the possibility it's someone within your circle?" The thought had flickered, dismissed as paranoid delusion. Now voiced by this seasoned professional, it took malignant root. A mental inventory commenced. The landlord, my confidant, holding a spare key for emergencies. The ghost of a past relationship. Had I truly reclaimed that key? Thorne proposed a new layer of surveillance. Minuscule cameras, masters of concealment, recording relentlessly. It felt like a further surrender of privacy, yet I grasped at any straw. For a week, silence reigned. No notes manifested. A fragile tendril of hope began to unfurl. Then, late one night, my phone pulsed, an alert from the hidden network. With hands slick with dread, I summoned the feed. The image swam in gloom, illuminated only by the faint sentinel glow of my nightlight. A figure draped in shadow moved through my living room. Dark attire, gloved hands, face lost within the cowl of a hood. I watched, a statue carved from fear as the shape navigated the room with eerie familiarity. It approached my bookshelf, selected a specific volume, and slipped a note within its pages. Then it pivoted, its hidden face directed squarely at the unseen lens. A chilling certainty bloomed. It knew. The figure raised a gloved hand in a gesture of near comical salute. Turning, it dissolved back into the shadows. The faint click of the front door echoed through the recording. Sleep was an impossibility that night. I huddled in a corner of the bedroom, a kitchen knife clutched like a talisman, nerves screaming at every sigh of the old building. When dawn finally bled through the blinds, I approached the bookshelf, a pit of nausea churning within me. The note rested precisely where the phantom had placed it. "Ingenious the cameras," it lauded, "but your efforts remain insufficient." I summoned Thorne immediately. He reviewed the footage, his features grim. "This escalates beyond stalking," he murmured. "This is a performance, Elias. They revel in demonstrating their impunity, their absolute access." The ensuing days were a blur of renewed fortification. Locks were replaced, sophisticated alarms installed. Thorne even commissioned a sweep for clandestine listening devices or hidden lenses. Yet cocooned within these augmented defenses, safety remained elusive. A gnawing intuition persisted. The solution was proximate, obscured by my own frantic gaze. It struck me in the dead hours of another sleepless night. A revelation cold and sharp as falling glass, jolting me into stark awareness. I knew the architect of my terror. Trembling fingers fumbled for the phone, dialing Thorn. "You need to come back," I managed, my voice thin. "I believe I've solved it." He arrived within the hour, disheveled, eyes clouded with sleep. I led him not to the violated living space, but to my small home office, to the desk burdened with my own scribblings. "Observe," I urged, retrieving a stack of aged notebooks. Within lay page after page of handwritten text, fragments of stories, character concepts, nocturnal musings, all rendered in a familiar, cramped, arachnid script, the very hand that penned the tormenting notes. "I fail to comprehend," Thorn confessed, bewildered. I drew a ragged breath. "It's me," I whispered. "I've been writing them, unconsciously perhaps, in some fugue state. That's why no camera ever captured an intruder, why the phantom knew precisely where to strike, precisely what words would inflict the deepest wounds." Thorn regarded me for a long, silent moment before nodding slowly. "It's documented," he conceded quietly. "Profound stress, trauma. Certain conditions can fracture the self, manifest such dissociative actions." I collapsed into my chair, adrift in a disorienting sea of relief and horror. The enigma was unraveled, yet the implications were monstrous. What other hidden currents moved beneath the surface of my awareness? In the subsequent weeks, therapy commenced alongside a battery of psychological evaluations. The notes ceased their insidious appearances, but the fear lingered, a phantom limb. Memories became suspect, actions scrutinized. Months have passed now. The fragments of my life are slowly being reassembled. Yet the unsettling conviction remains that a detached fragment of myself still watches from the shadows, patient. And sometimes, in the vulnerable quiet of the night, I find myself instinctively searching for folded paper, wondering if the game has truly concluded or merely entered a new, more terrifying phase. A visceral clench seized my gut, sharp enough to halt my hands mid-task, compelling my gaze toward the regulator clock on my workbench. Its pendulum hung inert. 3:33 a.m. A quick, frantic scan confirmed the impossible. Every chronometer in my atelier, from the towering grandfather near the entrance to the delicate marine chronometer under glass, mirrored this exact frozen moment. Hands locked, gears stilled, as if a universal edict of stillness had descended upon my sanctuary of time. The sweep seconds refused their ceaseless dance. I blinked, expecting the illusion to shatter, but the paralysis held. A film of cold perspiration slicked my brow. I swiped at it with a knuckle, the rough cotton catching on stubble. This wasn't fatigue playing tricks. This was real. I am Elias Thorn, a mender of timepieces, clocks, wristwatches, intricate custom builds. They are my domain. Clients entrust me with heirlooms rescued from dusty oblivion, stopwatches steeped in sentiment. My nights unfold within these walls, cocooned in the familiar chorus of ticks and tocks, a symphony I prefer to the clamor of the day. Tonight was dedicated to resurrecting a complex automaton clock promised to its owner by week's end. I'd stepped away for water, a brief respite to stretch cramped limbs. Returning, my eyes sought the grandfather clock's familiar face. 3:33, then the ship's bell clock on the opposing wall. 3:33. Coincidence, perhaps? My gaze dropped to the vintage hunter case resting open on the bays. 3:33. The knot in my stomach tightened into a fist. From a drawer, I retrieved a small, brutally accurate digital clock, its quartz heart immune to mechanical whims. Powering it on, the LCD flared. 3:33. A chill traced my spine, prompting a swift turn. Empty air pressed back. The workshop felt suddenly dense, airless. My own breathing sounded ragged, amplified in the profound quiet. Placing the digital clock beside the Hunter case, I tapped its plastic shell. Unchanging, I strained my ears, listening for the comforting mechanical heartbeat of my trade. Silence. Utter, absolute silence, as if the room were encased in vacuum-sealed glass. Even the veteran refrigerator in the corner had ceased its low thrum. Slowly, I pivoted, inventorying each timepiece. Every dial, every digital display, held fast at the identical instant. The workshop itself appeared undisturbed beneath the stark glow of the overhead fluorescence. Micro screwdrivers scattered like metallic insects. Tweezers poised, polishing cloths rumpled. Orphaned gears glinting. My stool, my half-drunk mug of cooling coffee, the open maw of my toolbox, all mundane. Yet the temporal anomaly screamed. My chest constricted, my mouth turned to dust. I waited, eyes darting, hunting for any flicker of motion, any clue. Then a peripheral flutter, near the tiered shelves laden with derelict clocks cannibalized for parts. Not a figure, not quite a shadow tethered to any object. It was a disturbance in the air, dark and amorphous, possessing the texture of agitated smoke, coiling and uncoiling as it slid along the shelf's edge. I was rooted to the spot. My legs felt like lead, yet some morbid compulsion urged them forward. Was I losing my grip? My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, audible in my own ears. As I neared the shelves, the shape dissolved, vanishing into the clutter of brass and glass. I stood there, probing the spaces between defunct timekeepers, seeking residual movement. Nothing. Only a tremor in my own hands betrayed the encounter. The air here felt distinctly colder. Turning back, I checked the clocks again. Still 3:33. The synchronicity baffled me. Even broken mechanisms rarely conspire to display the identical incorrect time. A faint susurrus reached me then, like clandestine murmuring just below the threshold of hearing. I spun, facing the storeroom door across the workshop. No one. The whispering persisted, indistinct, syllables blurring into a soft rush of sound. My breath hitched, shallow and rapid. My pulse throbbed in my fingertips. Tentatively, I advanced toward the storeroom. The murmuring intensified slightly, yet remained unintelligible, before abruptly ceasing. Silence rushed back in. Should I plunge the room into darkness, conduct a search? The thought repulsed me. I felt exposed enough under the lights, cornered. Abandoning the investigation, I hurried to the front, fumbled with the lock, and pushed the door open, stepping into the pre-dawn chill. The cool air, smelling of damp asphalt and distant city life, was a balm on my face. I checked my mobile phone. The screen glowed. 3:34. The knot in my stomach writhed anew. 3:34 out here, while inside, time itself was snagged on 3:33. I retreated from the entrance, letting the heavy door swing shut. My arms trembled. After a minute or two, gathering frayed composure, I forced myself back inside. Immediately, the familiar symphony resumed. Ticks echoed, gears whirred, second hands swept forward. The clocks now uniformly displayed 3:34. A ragged sigh escaped me as I rubbed my temples. Had I hallucinated the entire episode? The residual dread, the clammy skin, argued otherwise. I sank onto my stool, needing its solid support. The clocks ticked on, relentlessly normal. I found myself glancing at them every few seconds until the hour turned 4, but the anomaly did not repeat. Eventually, exhausted and unnerved, I secured the workshop and went home. The following night found me back at my bench, driven by a mixture of apprehension and a perverse need to know. Would it happen again? I immersed myself in the delicate repair of a small mantel clock, replacing worn pinions, tuning its chime hammers. As 3 a.m. approached, a familiar tension coiled within me, a weight settling on my shoulders. My gaze kept flicking to the regulator. 3:28, 3:29, 3:30. My palms grew damp. At 3:31, a sharp, anomalous click echoed from a nearby wall clock. I looked up. Its second hand was arrested at the zenith. Then, like a contagion, the stillness spread, clock after clock falling silent, freezing. By 3:33, the profound silence reigned once more. Dread washed over me, cold and heavy, yet threaded with a stark curiosity. I rose deliberately, moving through the stilled workshop. Reaching out, I touched the glass face of a stopped wall clock. Cool metal, smooth glass, nothing outwardly strange. A tap yielded no response from the frozen hands. The whispering began again, this time directly behind me. I whirled. The smoky shape was back, gliding near my workbench now, undulating from the bench towards the corner by the door. It possessed no discernible features, merely a concentration of shadow clinging low to the floorboards. My heart pounded against my ribs. I pressed back against the rough painted wall, the texture grounding me. The whispers were clearer this time, overlapping voices, rapid and low, yet certain phrases pierced the susurrus. Wasted moments, one seemed to hiss. Another breathed, hours you'll never reclaim. My chest tightened further. Images flooded my mind. Deadlines ignored. Vital tasks deferred for trivial distractions. Time squandered scrolling through meaningless feeds. Each memory struck like a physical blow. My breathing grew shallow, vision blurring at the edges. The shape drifted nearer, the voices swelling in intensity. Run, every instinct screamed, but my feet felt fused to the floor. With immense effort, I forced a single step towards the entity. No plan, just a primal need to resist being passive prey. My knees trembled, but I shuffled forward. The voices faltered for an instant, as if acknowledging my movement. Then they resumed, weaving tales of unfinished projects, abandoned ambitions. My hands shook uncontrollably. Words failed me. The shape flickered, then flowed across the floor towards the shelves of spare parts, melting into the shadows behind them. Slowly, hesitantly, the ticking returned, a scattered beat at first, then coalescing into the familiar rhythm. I glanced up. Second hands were in motion. The wall clock read 3:34. This became the rhythm of my nights. Every witching hour at 3:33, my world paused. I tried waiting outside until after the appointed minute, but an irresistible pull drew me back inside, compelling me to witness it, to perhaps decipher its code. A new high-precision digital timer joined the collective freeze. Recording attempts on my phone yielded only frustration. The video feed would lock at 3:33, then resume seamlessly at 3:34, erasing the intervening minute of anomaly. The shadow entities varied in number, sometimes one, sometimes several, drifting like spectral custodians among the timepieces. Their whispers harped on lost opportunities, squandered chances, occasionally hissing my name. Elias, in a low, sibilant rush that raised gooseflesh. Cold sweats became routine. A persistent tremor lingered in my hands for hours afterward. Coffee consumption soared, a futile attempt to sharpen senses dulled by dread. One night, I tried defiance. Donning headphones, I flooded my ears with loud music. At precisely 3:33, the sound abruptly died. The headphones were inert. Whispers curled around me from behind. I refused to turn, fixing my gaze rigidly on the cluttered bench, though every nerve screamed for flight. My skin prickled, mouth parched. After an eternity compressed into 60 seconds, I felt an icy brush against my shoulder. I sprang from the stool, tearing the headphones off. The shadow pulsed beside me, a tangible void. Nausea surged and I stumbled backward, nearly upending my toolbox. Then the ticking resumed, punctual as ever, and the presence evaporated. I remained crumpled on the floor for several minutes, gasping for air. Sleep became a fractured thing, snatched in daylight hours. I began arriving at the workshop near midnight, avoiding daytime interactions. My appearance grew haggard, my demeanor jumpy, concentration frayed. Simple repairs became fraught with errors, misaligned hands, over-oiled gear trains. One evening, resolve hardened. I would lock myself in from midnight till dawn, determined to capture irrefutable proof. Multiple cameras were deployed, older digital models capable of continuous recording, positioned on tripods aimed at the main clock, the parts shelf, the workbench. Recording commenced around 2:50 a.m. I sat at my bench, a watchman waiting for his own haunting. 3:33 arrived. The clocks froze. The low whirring of the cameras ceased. Their status lights extinguished. The shadow shapes materialized, drifting with proprietary slowness. Whispers eddied, dissecting my past choices, quantifying lost time. A lump formed in my throat. I resisted reacting, though the trembling intensified. My eyes tracked one specific shape as it oozed across the wall. It seemed to sense my scrutiny, pausing, turning its featureless presence towards me. No eyes, yet I felt utterly seen. My chest seized, fists clenched. I tried to shout, to demand, but my throat locked, mouth working uselessly. The minute elapsed. Clocks stirred. Cameras blinked back to life. Reviewing the footage was soul-crushing. Each recording showed me sitting, then an abrupt jump cut, then me sitting again. The crucial minute excised. No shadows, no whispers, no proof. Only the lingering certainty in my gut. Experimentation followed. Different light bulbs, incandescent, halogen, LED, hoping one spectrum might reveal more. Rearranging the clocks, setting alarms minutes before the event, attempting to disrupt the cycle. Futile. The freeze was absolute, the shadows punctual, their whispered indictments relentless. They spoke of time neglected, moments forgotten. Physical harm never occurred, yet they left me perpetually unnerved, shaken to the core. One night, a new phrase emerged from the chorus. We watch and we wait. The words sent an arctic current through me. My palms became instantly clammy. I found myself casting constant, wary glances, anticipating something more, but their behavior remained unchanged. They whispered, drifted, and vanished precisely at 3:34. Now I continue my nocturnal vigil. The pattern is ingrained, familiar yet never comfortable. Understanding eludes me, but abandoning this place, my tools, my livelihood, feels impossible. So I remain. I endure the nightly pause. Each time the whispers begin, my heart gives a heavy, muffled thump. Sometimes the urge to squeeze my eyes shut until it passes is overwhelming, but I force myself to watch the shapes, searching for some detail, some minuscule clue to unravel this temporal knot. None has ever presented itself. I accept now this nightly intrusion. At 3:33, time halts. The shadows emerge. They murmur of my past, of minutes irrevocably lost. I still don't know why, or if it will ever cease. Ignoring them invites closer proximity. Observing them seems to maintain a fragile boundary. Then 3:34 arrives, they dissipate, and I am left in the sudden, almost deafening cacophony of ticking clocks. This is the unwritten postscript to my life as a horologist. Night after night, pulse hammering, I work. I mend the timepieces of others while haunted by my own missing minutes. Nothing prepared me for this. I live with it. Each night as 3:33 nears, I hold my breath, awaiting the smoke-dark figures. They always come, gliding through my atelier, spectral auditors of squandered moments. Then time restarts and I resume my work, hands striving for steadiness, unable to rewind the relentless clock or escape the ghosts of lost seconds. The tumblers yielded with a scrape, a small metallic sigh that echoed cavernously in the grand foyer. Ice bloomed in my veins. I stood statue still, a trespasser in the opulent silence I'd been entrusted to showcase. Footfalls muffled yet distinct approached from the kitchen's depths. A chilling certainty crystallized. This grand house held another visitor, unannounced, and their intentions felt far removed from appreciating the parquet flooring. Elara Vance. 5 years navigating the intricate dance of property sales, guiding dreams into doorways. Usually the rhythm was predictable, polished presentations, careful negotiations, the satisfying click of a sale closing. But this twilight, as autumn bled gold and crimson across the manicured expanse of Ashworth Manor, the familiar cadence shattered. Lengthening shadows warped the landscape into something alien, and I, Elara, was ensnared in a waking horror. It began innocuously, another tour etched in the day's schedule. Ashworth Manor, a jewel of Victorian architecture fused with sleek modernity, sprawled across 5 acres of whispering woodland. Securing the listing felt like winning a lottery, the commission a glittering promise. The afternoon's viewers, an elegantly attired couple nearing their silver years, had played their part convincingly. Thoughtful questions, nods at the intricate crown molding, musings on where their Steinway might reside within the cavernous living room. As dusk painted the windows violet, the wife feigned forgetfulness, a cashmere scarf supposedly abandoned in the master suite. No trouble at all, I'd assured them, professional warmth masking my eagerness to close. I'll retrieve it during my final check. Swing by the office tomorrow. They departed. I secured the locks, intending a swift return for the scarf and a final sweep, a small courtesy for such a prestigious property, ensuring perfection for the next potential gaze. Now trapped in the opulent entryway, I silently damned that professional diligence. The forgotten scarf lay draped over a nearby console table, a silken accusation. I'd spotted it instantly upon re-entry, but before retreat was possible, the lock had turned. Not the owners, my gut screamed it. Muffled conversation, the scrape and thud of substantial weight being shifted. These sounds confirmed a violation. Drawn by a morbid curiosity, I edged towards the kitchen archway. Through the gap, two figures moved with illicit purpose, clad in shadow-like attire. One clutched the brutal curve of a crowbar. "You take the upper floors," a gravelly voice commanded. "I'll start here. Find the vault. Supposed to be hidden well. Thieves, plunderers invading this sanctuary." A cold sweat pricked my skin. The alarm, had I set it? Unlikely, planning mere minutes inside. I retreated, a ghost in expensive shoes. Escape? The front door was a death trap. Hide, call for aid. My hand slapped against an empty pocket. The phone. Dread, thick and suffocating, washed over me. I'd left it beside the sink, a careless offering on the kitchen's granite altar. Footsteps echoed on the grand staircase, the second intruder ascending. Urgency propelled me. I melted into the adjacent study, easing the heavy oak door closed until it clicked softly. Darkness pooled here, disturbed only by slivers of streetlight, piercing the brocade curtains. My eyes darted desperate. The imposing mahogany desk offered no real concealment. The towering bookshelves? Impractical. Then, tucked behind a flourishing potted palm, almost swallowed by shadow, a narrow door, incongruous. The dumbwaiter shaft, a relic noted with quaint amusement during the tour. No time for deliberation. I contorted, squeezing into the cramped, musty space, pulling the panel shut just as the study door swung open again. A stark white beam sliced through the darkness, visible through the ventilation slats. "Clear down here," a voice reported upwards. A muffled reply, "Nothing yet. Keep searching. It's here." Breath held captive in my lungs. I listened as the intruder prowled the study, drawers groaning open, knuckles rapping against walls, seeking hollow secrets. Each second stretched into an agonizing eternity. What if? The thought remained unfinished, shattered by a triumphant yell from above. "Bingo! Got eyes on it!" The man in the study bolted, leaving me trembling in my vertical coffin. I exhaled, a ragged, silent gasp. The reprieve was fragile, fleeting, trapped, phoneless, vulnerable. I strained, listening to the silence that followed the upstairs discovery, a silence thick with menace. Minutes crawled by. Convinced the immediate danger had passed, I eased the dumbwaiter door ajar, emerging like a spelunker from the earth. The vast house felt unnervingly still, yet occupied. My objective burned clear. Retrieve the phone, call for salvation. Stealth became my shield. I drifted towards the kitchen, each footfall measured. Reaching the threshold, another shout echoed from the upper landing, laced with avarice. "Found, hidden behind a painting master suite." Heavy boots pounded the staircase in descent. Instinctively, I plunged behind a large, leafy fern near the doorway, heart hammering against my ribs. Please don't come this way. Futile hope. They stormed into the kitchen, faces alight with predatory glee. "Right, let's crack this baby and vanish," the taller one declared, slamming a compact metal safe onto the central island. And there it lay, my phone, gleaming innocently on the counter, a universe away. As their focus narrowed on the safe's mechanism, I began my perilous crawl. Millimeter by agonizing millimeter, my hand extended, just a bit more. My fingertips brushed the cool glass, then curled around it, a surge of desperate hope. But in withdrawing, my elbow clipped a porcelain vase. It wobbled, suspended in a horrifying slow-motion arc, before shattering on the tiled floor. Two heads snapped up, eyes wide with surprise, then hardening with fury, locked onto mine. A tableau of mutual shock held for a nanosecond before splintering into pandemonium. I scrambled, lunging for the rear exit, fingers wrestling with the deadbolt as curses rained down behind me. The lock gave, and I exploded into the chill embrace of the night. Air seared my lungs as I flew across the dew-slicked lawn. Behind me, the unmistakable rhythm of pursuit, heavy soles pounding the earth, gaining. I swerved sharply towards the property's edge, towards the dense embrace of the woodland, seeking sanctuary in its black depths. Branches clawed at my face, briars tore at my clothes as I plunged deeper. Their crashing pursuit echoed unnervingly close. My ankle twisted on an unseen root. The ground rushed up, knocking the wind from me in a brutal gasp. Scrabbling to rise, a vice-like grip clamped onto my arm, wrenching me violently around. I stared into the enraged face of the taller intruder, his eyes feral in the gloom. "You stupid bitch," he snarled, fist drawing back. Primal instinct surged, overriding fear. My knee snapped upwards, connecting solidly with his groin. A strangled groan escaped him as he folded, clutching himself. The grip loosened. I didn't hesitate, didn't look back, just ran. Time dissolved into a frantic blur of motion and terror. Directionless flight, driven solely by the need for escape, for light, for safety. Suddenly, the suffocating press of trees yielded. I stumbled onto pavement, into the relative sanctuary of a suburban street dotted with welcoming porch lights. Far off, the faint, rising keen of sirens. My legs buckled. I collapsed onto the damp grass of the nearest lawn, breath tearing through me in ragged sobs. A porch light flicked on, framing an elderly woman in a quilted robe, her expression etched with concern. "Heavens, child, are you hurt?" she called, her voice trembling slightly. "Shall I ring the constables?" I could only manage a desperate nod, still gasping. As she retreated indoors, my gaze fell to my hand, still fiercely clutching the phone, an anchor miraculously held through the storm. Minutes later, flashing blue and red lights painted the quiet street, followed by the reassuring presence of paramedics. While recounting the ordeal, having scrapes and bruises assessed, the enormity of the night settled upon me. A routine task twisted into a crucible of terror. I had stared into the abyss of a violent encounter and somehow emerged. The following days were shrouded in the procedural fog of police reports and insurance claims, underscored by a persistent tremor of fear. Every unlocked door seemed to whisper of potential threats. Yet, beneath the fear, a different seed took root: resilience. I had confronted raw violence and found an unexpected wellspring of defiance within myself. That night in Ashworth Manor would remain indelible, a scar on memory, but it wouldn't be my defining chapter. Now, the turning of a key carries a heightened awareness, a readiness born of experience. For sometimes it is in the deepest shadows that we discover the unexpected contours of our own strength. The instant my gaze fell upon the script scrawled across the glass, a glacial cold seized my veins. It was the same chaotic hand, the jagged, almost broken lettering that had materialized on our threshold with unnerving regularity these past weeks. Only this time, the violation wasn't confined to the porch. It defiled my bedroom mirror, rendered in a pigment sickeningly reminiscent of dried blood. I know your dreams. 3 months prior, we'd staked our claim on the old Ashworth place. Clara and I, Elias, had yearned for years to shed the city's relentless clamor. Finding this property, 20 sprawling acres, a skeletal but handsome 19th century farmhouse, all offered at a sum that whispered of hidden flaws, felt like destiny. We leapt. Perhaps we should have looked before we did. Those initial weeks unfolded like a half-forgotten idyll. Days bled into weeks spent resurrecting the house's faded grandeur, charting the tangled wilderness of the fields, simply breathing in the profound quietude. No blaring horns, no keening sirens, only the sibilant rush of wind through ancient oaks and the distant placid lowing from the neighboring pastures. At night, the cosmos unfurled with a brilliance that stole the air from my lungs. Then the missives began. The first seemingly benign, a scrap of paper weighted by a stone near the back door. Fine property. We chalked it up to a reticent neighbor, though the handwriting prickled, uneven, spidery, like a fevered child's attempt at elegance. Days later, another rested on the weathered arm of the porch glider. Best keep things locked tight. A tremor of disquiet ran through us. We always secured the house. That night, I compulsively rechecked every bolt, every latch, a knot tightening low in my gut. The notes persisted, manifesting in places that defied logic. Secreted beneath a terracotta planter, perched on the railing of our second-floor veranda, impaled on a gnarled branch at the property's far edge, slipped inside the frame of our bedroom window. Each message sharpened the edge of dread. Enjoy watching. Clara sleeps so peacefully. Closer now. We summoned the constabulary naturally. They arrived, dutifully noted our anxieties, yet unearthed nothing tangible. No latent prints, no disturbed earth, no conceivable point of ingress into our meticulously secured home. A mischievous local, they surmised, advising surveillance equipment. We plunged deeper. I acquired a fortress of electronic eyes, motion detectors, piercing alarms for every conceivable opening. Floodlights were installed, bathing the acreage in stark, artificial daylight. I even purchased a firearm, an act that warred with my lifelong convictions. But terror possesses a chilling capacity to rewrite one's principles. A fragile peace descended. The insidious messages ceased. We began, cautiously, to exhale, allowing the possibility that it had merely been some cruel, elaborate jest. Then came the night of the mirror. I stood transfixed, my thoughts snagging on the sheer impossibility. How had entry been gained? Alarms stood silent sentinel, cameras watched unblinking, locks remained steadfast. I had performed my nightly ritual of checks with obsessive precision mere hours before. Beside me, Clara murmured in her sleep. I hastily scrubbed the crimson words away before her eyes could open to this new horror. The earlier notes had frayed her nerves to the breaking point. This would shatter her. The remainder of the night I spent hunched over monitors, scrutinizing hours of footage, interrogating sensor logs. Emptiness, blankness, as if the message had precipitated from the very air within the room. Morning brought another call to the authorities. This time their approach held a new gravity. They conducted a thorough sweep, dusted surfaces futilely, questioned the few neighbors scattered across the miles. Still, absence reigned. Listen, the lead detective finally offered, his expression somber. This kind of persistence, It's outside the norm. Whoever this is, they're not playing games. You might want to consider finding somewhere else to stay for a bit. But where? Every resource, every dream was sunk into the soil of this place, and beneath the fear, a cold fury simmered. This was our sanctuary. No phantom, no lunatic would exorcise us from our own home. We remained. I took leave from work, transforming into a reluctant sentinel, pacing the grounds with the cold weight of the gun, startled by every rustle of leaves, every creak of old timber. Clara became a ghost in her own home, sleep-starved, her gaze perpetually darting towards shadows. The harmony of our decade-long marriage strained, eroded by the constant corrosive stress, and the notes resumed their impossible appearances, nestled within a locked desk drawer, lying obscenely on our freshly made bed, etched into the bark of an oak I'd examined only hours before. We fought back with desperate ingenuity, tripwires fashioned from fishing line, more cameras, layers of flour sifted across thresholds, hoping for a single footprint. Nothing. It was like battling vapor. Weeks bled into an exhausting month. The relentless vigilance carved hollows beneath my eyes and stripped weight from my frame. Clara spoke of fleeting movements glimpsed at the periphery of vision, of whispers that coiled in the silence of empty rooms. I feared for her sanity. I feared for my own. Then the night arrived that ripped the veil. Clara's scream tore through the darkness, sharp and visceral. I surged upright, hand scrabbling for the weapon on the nightstand. Dimly illuminated, a figure stood at the foot of our bed. Tall, impossibly slender, its limbs possessing an unnatural length. I leveled the gun, my hand betraying me with violent tremors. "Leave," the word ripped from my throat, a pathetic attempt at bravado. "Leave now or I shoot." Slowly it pivoted and my heart seized. The face, dear God, the face. It defied description, belonged to no known species, skin like stretched parchment, pallid and almost luminous, pulled taut over an elongated cranium, eyes vast, obsidian pools devoid of light. Its mouth, a lipless fissure bisecting the lower face, curved into a hideous rictus meant to mimic a smile. I fired. The report was cataclysmic in the confined space. The entity flinched as the slug struck, yet it did not fall. Instead, it laughed, a high, unnerving ululation that scraped raw against my nerves. Then it was upon me, moving with a speed that defied physics. I felt talons, yes, talons, tear across my chest. Pain exploded. I screamed, firing again, blindly, like trying to strike mist. Clara's screams continued, yet sounded impossibly distant. Everything receded, save the searing agony and those abyssal eyes drilling into my soul. How long the assault endured, I cannot say. An eternity compressed into heartbeats. Abruptly, the pressure vanished. Blinking through the haze of pain, I saw it by the window, a stark silhouette against the moonless sky. It regarded us one final time, and I could have sworn that lipless mouth stretched wider. Then, with impossible swiftness, it dissolved into the night. The police came. They documented the bullet impacts scarring the walls, observed the vicious furrows carved into my flesh. But beyond that, the room yielded nothing. No foreign prints, no stray fibers, no trace of biological matter, inconsistent with ours. They regard us now, I know, as casualties of our own minds, driven to violence by paranoia and shared delusion. perhaps believing them would offer some perverse comfort. We fled the house the following dawn, abandoning nearly everything we owned, taking only what could be carried. We drift now, Clara and I, perpetual transients in a landscape of nameless motels and temporary lodgings, always vigilant, forever anticipating the next cryptic message. For they do still find us. Less frequently, yes, but with chilling precision, reminders that it remains, watching, patient. What is it? A relic of some forgotten folklore, a thing slipped through the cracks of reality, a specter born of the house itself. The taxonomy hardly matters. Its existence is undeniable, its attention unwavering. Sometimes in the deepest hours, a flicker of movement outside a cheap motel window catches my eye, a tall, gaunt shadow, or I glimpse eyes too dark, too knowing in a passing crowd, and I am left to wonder how long this flight can last, how long until its observation ceases to be enough. If this account finds you, heed its warning. Beware the bargain that seems too perfect, the sanctuary offered too cheaply, and should inexplicable messages begin to appear, delivered by an impossible hand, do not hesitate. Flee, flee, and never look back, because some watchers never tire, and you cannot fathom the consequence when they finally decide to draw closer.